Jihaad Campbell is already looking like a steal of the 2025 NFL Draft by the Philadelphia Eagles. He's one of many players whose stock is rising so far at training camp.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to this Tuesday edition of the show. We are brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. I'm your host, Louis DiBiase. Thanks so much for hanging out with us today, recapping another eventful practice down at the NovaCare Complex for Philadelphia Eagles training camp. And today was a notable practice because it was the first practice the Eagles put on the pads, and they were hitting, and there were some big-time hits today down in South Philadelphia, and a big hit came from the rookie himself, Jihaad Campbell, on Dallas Goedert. Campbell was the star of the show today. His stock is rising today after about a week and a half of practice. We're going to do stock up, stock down, an early look at who's rising and who's falling so far on the 53-man roster for the Philadelphia Eagles 2025 season. And Campbell is the guy I want to talk about first because, wow, I mean, what a day for the rookie. First padded practice of his NFL career. I mean, it's all just been so great with Campbell so far, right? The shoulder injury, he's ahead of schedule. Vic Fangio didn't even think he was going to be on the practice field until August, let alone being with the first team defense in live 11-on-11s in shoulder pads. To see him not only dominating in one-on-ones as a pass rusher against running backs, that's just not a fair drill for running backs to go up against Jihaad Campbell, who naturally is an edge rusher. That was his first position in football, and some might still think that he's going to be an edge rusher at the next level. So he's dominating one-on-ones, especially the spin move, which is kind of his forte as a pass rusher. He's also looking really good holding his own in one-on-ones in coverage against running backs and tight ends, which is really impressive because I personally don't believe that Jihaad Campbell is going to be a really strong man coverage linebacker. I always think that's going to be, I don't want to say always one of his weaknesses, but Jihaad Campbell's superpowers are crashing downhill as a blitzer through the A and B gap, rushing off the edge, his range, sideline to sideline in the run game, his hit power. I think Jihaad Campbell, his length, again, his range, his vision, once that continues to improve, his anticipation and zone coverage is going to make him a very good zone coverage inside linebacker. Like, I think he has all those traits. It's why I believe he translates better to inside linebacker to edge. It's why I think Vic Fangio believes the same thing. But to hear that he's also holding his own in one-on-ones against running backs and tight ends is so encouraging because, again, not only is he new to this position, not only is that a weakness currently of Campbell, but those drills are set up for linebackers to fail. Like one-on-ones, running backs versus linebackers, tight ends versus linebackers, like those, even when I'm down at the Senior Bowl watching athletic coverage linebackers, those drills always give the advantage to the offense. So to hear that Campbell was making plays all day long in different areas of his game, like seeing that development already before our eyes, seeing that he's maybe farther along than we originally anticipated he would be at this point in his development process. But to also hear like he's making plays on Saquon Barkley. He completely blew up a run play today to Saquon in 11s. He destroyed Dallas Goedert right at the catch point, forcing a short gain. Like, that is really encouraging, and Campbell's stock is rising. And then that's just so encouraging because, again, this is the kind of player that even last year's number one ranked defense in the entire NFL did not have. Like, this is a new kind of player for the Eagles defense, and it's just so exciting. Again, the man coverage thing is really encouraging because I always kind of say that Campbell is going to be the Swiss Army knife for the defense, but I do wonder if he'll ever be a truly polished, like, every down inside linebacker. Or will they use him at inside linebacker in obvious running situations, or obviously when they're blitzing, and then at other times he's playing the edge? Like, you're really only maximizing his strengths. But I do wonder, like, how far along can he become at fixing those weaknesses. But he's got all the traits to do it. Like, he has the size, he has the speed. I think he has the lateral fluidity as an athlete. So he's just got to continue to develop in that way. And he's in the perfect defense. Like, it's not surprising at all that I think he's this far along already. Vic Fangio is one of the best linebacker coaches in the entire NFL. Like, he literally last year took a practice squad, bottom of the 53-man roster level edge rusher in Zach Bond, and in 1 year turned him into a first-team All-Pro. So what can he do with this all-world talent from the University of Alabama with every physical trait that you would want for an elite inside linebacker? Like, the sky is the limit. And the fact that he's already looking like what Quinyon Mitchell did last year at this time, or Jalen Carter a couple years ago, I will say I'm a little bit surprised. As much as Campbell was one of my favorite picks the Eagles have made in years, and he's the exact kind of player that I was begging for this defense to add this offseason, I thought it would take some time because of the injury, because he is still learning a newer position, especially at the NFL level. It takes time. I was wondering if the Eagles were going to try him out both at edge and inside linebacker to see where he truly fits. Like, again, it's only been one padded practice, so I don't want to overreact too much, but the fact that, like, Campbell was maybe the best player in the field today already from the jump is a little bit of a surprise for me. And maybe Howie Roseman did it again. Like, maybe just continue to take prospects from Alabama and Georgia. It just feels like it's working out for the Eagles. And again, it's very early on in the process, but Campbell's really exciting me. And although Jeremiah Trotter Jr. had a strong practice today as well in coverage and against the run as well in 11-on-11, some red zone drills, I think it's pretty likely that Jihaad Campbell is going to be the starting inside linebacker next to Bond week 1 against the Dallas Cowboys. So stock up to Jihaad Campbell after today's practice. Stock up, too, to Moro Ojomo. Moro Ojomo has been one of the best players so far throughout training camp. And I think we all kind of know that Moro Ojomo is going to take a big step this year. We all know now who Moro Ojomo is because Milton Williams is gone. Jordan Davis's play has been so up and down, and the question marks about his long-term role on this defensive line remain. Like, his question marks about who he is as a pass rusher remain. So we all kind of have a good idea that Moro Ojomo is going to have a much bigger role this year. But I don't know if it's because, and I don't feel like I'm suffering from this, but maybe it's more the casual fan or other media members that are kind of overlooking him. Maybe it has to do with, like, his draft status. There's just so many good young players on this defense that he just kind of gets lost in the shuffle. There's so many players in a similar situation to Moro Ojomo this year, like a Jalix Hunt and a Sidney Brown and a Keely Ringo, like guys that are have to step up, young players in their second or third year that are replacing really good starters that were role players, and now we're going to have massive, like, full-time starting roles. I don't know what it is, but I still feel like Ojomo, despite the numbers he put up last year, the elite efficiency as a pass rusher, the huge camp he's having already, is still kind of overlooked. Like, I don't know if you guys agree with that, but Moro Ojomo, I still believe, I don't think people understand just how good he could be this year. Again, I think everybody has a good understanding that he's a solid role player, a good rotational piece, but I think he has a Milton Williams 2024-like ceiling. I could absolutely see Moro Ojomo. He said it himself in his press conference this week. He could be the next Javon Hargrave, the next Milton Williams, that is a counterpart to a star defensive tackle on the Eagles' defensive line that ends up cashing in either in Philadelphia or elsewhere with another contract. Ojomo, every beat reporter has said it, every single day is constantly disrupting what the offense is trying to do. And what's so encouraging about that as well is that he is not taking advantage of Jalen Carter playing next to him. Jalen Carter has not practiced so far in training camp as he continues to recover from an injury. So Moro Ojomo is doing all of this as, like, the go-to guy at defensive tackle. I think Ojomo could have. He already kind of had a mini breakout season last year. He was a top 15 overall graded pass rusher on the inside, according to PFF. His pass rush win rate was top 5 in the NFL at his position. And again, he had less reps than other full-time starters, of course, as a rotational piece. But I think Ojomo could be a stud, like a Milton Williams level player that has like 5+ sacks and is up there in pass rush win rate yet again in 2025. And his stock is rising. Like, his breakout, it's happening just as much as Jalix Hunt is so far down at the NovaCare complex. Stock up as well, too. Edge rusher Joshua Uche had a big day today, had a sack on Jalen Hurts, potentially forced what some believe was a strip sack in actual live drills. And it was good to hear that Uche had a good day, because in Fangio's press conference this week, he said, Jalix Hunt has had a really strong summer. They love the strides he's taking. Nolan Smith, he's very encouraged that Nolan Smith's going to continue on the trajectory that he was on in 2024. But outside of that, when he was asked about the depth chart at the edge rusher position, he said nobody else has really stood out, good or bad. That normally for Fangio is not a ringing endorsement. Good to see that Uche got to Hurts a couple times in the backfield today, because he's in an open competition right now with Azeez Ojulari, with Antoine Powell-Ryland for playing time. And I think he's also kind of in a competition with the field, like other options outside the organization. They have to have a strong summer, I think, to hold off Howie Roseman making another move at this position. And Uche today had a couple really nice plays getting to the quarterback. And again, that's what I care about most with Uche, not really his run defense, because I think he's going to be a situational pass rusher in this position, in this rotation. And to hear he's getting to the quarterback, that's what I want to hear the most of anything. Also, stock up to Kelee Ringo after 3 straight days as the second cornerback up with the first team defense. Adoree Jackson as the featured guy, 3 practices in a row. Great sign that Kelee Ringo, the first day of padded practice, he was the starting cornerback up first opposite Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. One more stock up on the offensive side of the football. Tyler Steen finally gets a ringing endorsement of Jeff Stoutland, who met with the media today to accept his award from the PWA for assistant coaches, a Lifetime Achievement Award. Tyler Steen kind of had a couple shaky days, and it feels like he's been the named as the full-time starting right guard by default so far, because Kenyon Green's been injured and all these rookies have such a long way to go. But it sounds like he really had a good day of practice today. Jeff Stoutland, quote, "Today was a big day for Tyler Steen, in my opinion. He did some things that I've been talking to him about, and he executed them, and he did a good job." That's huge, because the Eagles have not really given Steen a lot of public ringing endorsements, so to hear that from Stoutland is a good sign. And Steen's getting all the first-team reps right now. There is not anybody right now seriously competing with him for that spot. That could change in the future, but right now, it's the Tyler Steen show at right guard. We'll get into stock down coming up next. Who's been struggling in training camp? Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is sponsored by Gametime. Look, we've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show that you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. I remember a couple years ago, I was going through a very similar thing when I went to see my favorite band, the 1975, in Toronto. On top of getting the great prices to that show, I also got a great panoramic seat view on the app. So I knew on top of the great price, I was getting a great view as well for my first concert for my favorite band. You can too. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use our code LOCKEDONNFL. You're going to get $20 off your first purchase. So terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks as always for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Stock up, stock down, the first episode of the 2025 season. Who, after the first 2 weeks of practice, the first padded practice today down at the NovaCare Complex, who's been making a case for themselves as a full-time starter, as a much bigger rotational piece on the offense or defense this year. Maybe just that they seem more like a lock to make the 53-man roster or a favorite to make the team. And we talked a lot about guys that have really been turning heads so far in practice in the first segment. Jihaad Campbell and Moro Ojomo and Jalix Hunt. I think those have been the 3 biggest winners of camp so far. And that's huge because those 3 are so instrumental to the defensive success of 2025. Great day as well for Joshua Uche at practice today. Kelee Ringo stock up as well. The first guy out there on the outside with the first team defense at corner opposite Quinyon Mitchell. And that kind of leads me into my first stock down of the day, and it's Adoree Jackson. And it's not because Ringo, although again, today, first padded practice, Ringo being the first man up tells you, even though Adoree Jackson had 3 straight practices where he was first up as the first team corner. Ringo being first up in padded practice tells me that he is still the leader in the clubhouse to start opposite Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean as one of the Eagles' boundary corners this year. So stock down to Adoree Jackson in that way, but also because I don't know if you guys watched all of Vic Fangio's press conference, but man, that guy is brutally honest. And I'm not going to lie, I think he's perfect for the Eagles defense, the current makeup of it, because his blunt honesty, his kind of old school, hard-nosed coaching style, it's very Nick Saban-esque, it's very Kirby Smart-esque, and when you have a team that's made up of, most of your core is made up of guys that went to the University of Alabama or Georgia, those guys can handle Vic Fangio's coaching style. But after hearing what he said about Adoree Jackson today, look, I kind of understand. I love Fangio personally. I think he's the perfect defensive coordinator for this Eagles football team, this current makeup of this roster. But I personally don't love his style of coaching for just in a vacuum for any NFL team. I think there's a reason he's not a head coach anymore. I think there's a reason the Miami Dolphins defensive players did not love this guy. I think there's a reason that Bryce Huff, pretty early on in the process last year, did not want to be a Philadelphia Eagle. And it's because today, like the stuff he says, like today, I can kind of understand why you might lose your not faith in Fangio, but I would get why it's hard to fight for this guy. Like, I don't think anything Fangio said was wrong, but the public call-out culture, I personally don't love as a head coach, but it is a motivating tactic. And you have to have thick skin to play for Fangio. And if he's doing this, it's because he's not giving up on you. If Fangio's not talking about you, that's when it's a problem. But Adoree Jackson's got to have thick skin because Fangio today said, look, it's time for Jackson to show who he is or who he's supposed to be because, and he said this specifically, the Tennessee Titans didn't re-sign him when his contract was up. I can't believe he said this, but he did. The New York Giants didn't re-sign him when his contract was up. Not only did he say that, but he said, I didn't even want to sign Adoree Jackson. This was a Howie Roseman move. I didn't even watch any tape on Adoree Jackson this offseason. When this was the quote. Not exactly, but he said, I digress, breaking it down in a nutshell. When Howie Roseman wants to sign somebody, Howie's going to sign them regardless of how I feel. And that's true to the Bryce Huff signing last year. That is not a ringing endorsement for Adoree Jackson. If you're Adoree Jackson, like Bryce Huff heard something very similar last year with what Fangio said to the media about him not being as far along as he would have hoped. And I think Bryce Huff he lost the passion to play for this football team after that. And again, Adoree Jackson, he's an older veteran. He's 31, 32 years old. Like, I don't think that's going to rattle Adoree, but it takes a special kind of player to play for Fangio because that's brutal. And on the day that Ringo is starting over him in padded practice, definitely stock down to Adoree Jackson. But again, it's not all that bad what Fangio said. It's a little too aggressive for my taste, but he is trying to motivate Adoree, and it's not like he's not giving him an opportunity to win this job. Again, 3 straight practices, Adoree Jackson started off as the first team outside corner, not Keely Ringo. And although Ringo's still the favorite to win the job, that was kind of what we started to see last year in camp with Isaiah Rodgers. He started to string along. Like, it wasn't always one day it's Rodgers, then it's Ringo, then it's Rodgers, then it's Ringo. It started off that way, kind of like this year. Ringo was the favorite most days. But then eventually Rodgers started to just be the guy to start practice every day. Adoree Jackson, 3 days in a row, that's not nothing. So it's stock down to Adoree. That's not really high praise, what Fangio said in his press conference. But it is clearly a motivating tactic, whether you agree with it or not. And he's giving Adoree a real chance to win this job. I personally wouldn't give him a real chance. If Keely Ringo loses this job to Adoree Jackson, to me, I'm going to go out there and sign somebody else because what Fangio said today is correct. Like, that was music to my ears because I don't believe Adoree Jackson is a consistent, good enough football player to start 17 regular season games for a team this good that has this high aspirations and potentially a playoff run. So for me, if it's not Ringo, it's the field. It's an Asante Samuel Jr. or somebody you trade for. I personally would not give Adoree Jackson the job, even if he beats out Ringo this offseason, because of, in part, what Fangio said today. Like, a lot of what he said was true, So definitely stock down to Adoree Jackson. Also stock down a quick one, Johnny Wilson, another bad drop today in 11 on 11s. Look, when you're that big and you don't create separation all that well and you're not a great run after the catch guy, you got to be able to catch the football because most of your receptions are going to be in traffic in the red zone over the middle of the field. Again, you're not going to create a lot of separation, so you got to win at the catch point. And if Johnny Wilson keeps dropping balls and yesterday he got posted up by a 5'10" slot corner in the red zone and lost that battle. Like, not good. Not a great start to the Johnny Wilson hive, which I've been a part of the last couple of years. So stock down to Johnny Wilson. And then I would say stock down as well to Nakobe Dean. Jihaad Campbell balling out today just kind of reminded me of the harsh reality that is the NFL. Like, but just think about it. And I've talked about it in the show before, but think about it this way. Nakobe Dean, for 2 years, dealt with injuries to start his NFL career and kind of inconsistent play. Finally gets a chance last year to be the full-time guy, has a breakout season, was one of the most underrated players on this Eagles defense, is balling out in the first playoff game of the season, of the playoff run, suffers a season-ending injury. The Eagles, who are such a stacked team, like they have no needs, they got to draft somebody. They, for the first time in 50 years, drafted inside linebacker in the first round. And Nakobe Dean is watching Jihaad Campbell right now ball out. Dean is on the PUP list. He'll likely start the year on the PUP list. Despite having a breakout season and he's in a contract year, Dean might not have a starting job to come back to. And there's nothing he did wrong. It's just the harsh reality of the NFL that he got injured. He's on a complete football team that had to draft somebody. It just happened to be a player at his position for the first time in five decades. In 50 years, it's just the harsh reality of football. It stinks. Nakobe Dean, again, after a career year, might come back to his football team as a rotational backup player. And that's crazy. But again, that's the reality of the NFL. All right, guys, we'll wrap up this Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles. Coming up next, is it concerning or encouraging that the Eagles defense right now looks farther along than the Eagles offense? We'll get into that coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back. Fire up the group chats and get your draft boards ready. Buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreaction that we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy this year. Myself and all the guys at Locked On Eagles, we're playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. Yahoo Fantasy has all the features that you need. We've been doing our keeper league since 2009, so this is season 16. We have 2 keepers, 13 teams, a lot of new rule changes. You need somebody like Yahoo Fantasy to come through for you. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy, they're actually dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and in general, more ways to win. And it all begins on August 4th. So stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy football league at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. Thanks as always for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Louis DiBiase wrapping up this Tuesday edition of the show. What a day of practice. The Eagles put on the pads for the first time so far this summer. A lot of standouts, especially Jihaad Campbell stealing the show today. Howie Roseman might have done it again. In general, the Eagles' defense looks like they've been winning so far early on in training camp. Like Jalen Hurts has had a really strong spring and summer so far. I think there's been some really good things from the offensive line, and the running game looks equally as effective with Saquon Barkley. Saquon scored a touchdown today in practice, and Lane Johnson, probably out of frustration, threw up the double birds to the defense, 2 middle fingers, probably again out of frustration, because the Eagles' defense, they've been better. Is that encouraging or is that discouraging for the 2025 outlook for this season? I think it's encouraging because, look, let's add some context to what's going on. Number one, a defense normally, most of the time, early on in training camp is always ahead of the offense because the offense has more things they're installing that takes a lot more, mental reps, testing things out. I just feel like naturally the defense is more instinctual. They can kind of just play free and loose earlier in training camp than an offense, especially, and Cam Jurgens said this today, they have a brand new play caller. It's not a brand new offense, but Kevin Patullo has to figure out his own wrinkle of what his offense is going to look like compared to Kellen Moore and Brian Johnson and Nick Sirianni. So although the offense has more continuity from a personnel perspective, from a schematic and coaching perspective, the defense is farther along with Vic Fangio in year 2. Reed Blankenship said it himself on the Cooper DeJean Blankenship Exciting Mike's podcast that they're just like nonverbal now. They're all communicating just by a look. Like they're so in tune with this defensive scheme. And Zach Baun said the same thing on that show. Like they are so much farther along this year at this time than they were last year. And so I think because of that, the defense is farther along. So that shouldn't surprise you. Again, defenses are just naturally farther along early on in camp. And for me, I'm encouraged by this because where are the question marks on the 2025 Eagles roster? It's not on offense. I don't think a bad training camp is going to, there's not much that could concern me about this Eagles offense. They are so established, so proven with star talent at every single position, all prime proven players that I would much rather have a defense with a lot more question marks look better early on than an offense that I know is going to produce. I at least know they're going to be a top 3 rushing offense in football, and I know the passing game is going to have some massive games, especially in the most important moments. That's when the passing game seems to come through. So, yeah, is it discouraging a little bit that the passing game specifically has been a little up and down so far? Sure. But because of all the reasons I just laid out, I'm not surprised, number one. I'm not concerned. And I'm actually encouraged that it's the defense that's balling out. Like, I like hearing Jihaad Campbell is blowing up a play from Saquon Barkley or Dallas Goedert because Jihaad Campbell, the Eagles defense needs this guy to come through with Nakobe Dean out early on in the season. Jalix Hunt, I love hearing he's balling out and even sometimes beating Jordan Mailata to the quarterback because Jalix Hunt has to replace Josh Sweat and Brandon Graham. Like, I really love hearing Moro Ojomo is every single practice disrupting and getting to the quarterback because Moro Ojomo has to replace Milton Williams. He's the guy now. So this defense, again, they're heading into year 2 with Fangio, and they have their pillars still established on all 3 levels of this unit, but there's a lot more question marks. So I would be more concerned if the offense was just shredding the defense. Nobody's getting pressure. Keely Ringo looks terrible in coverage. The safeties just look like they're lost out there, in cover 2 and new looks that Fangio's giving them. So for me, I think it's actually a positive. We were talking about it today on our Locked On Eagles squad show. Make sure you go check that out on YouTube and wherever you get the audio form of the podcast. And I wanted to kind of dive in deeper to that fact because Mark Farzetta, our host of the squad show, he was a little bit concerned. I'm not. I'm encouraged by that because, again, the offense, are we really nervous that they're going to regress? Even in 2023, the collapse of that season, when they were 10-1, they were throwing all over teams. It was the defense, to me, in my opinion, that was the bigger issue until you started losing those games against San Francisco and Dallas and Seattle, and then the offense couldn't really move the ball. But when they were 10-1, even with all the inconsistencies of the Brian Johnson, Nick Sirianni offense, they were still one of the most productive offenses from a yardage and scoring perspective in the entire NFL. This offense is just too talented to not be good. So, yes, it's music to my ears. So far, the defense is getting the best of the offense. Let me know what you think. Hit us up on X at LockedOnBirds, at DiBiase, LOE. Thanks as always for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. I'll see you tomorrow for another edition of LOE. Until then, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.